Welcome, David Ryan. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our audience here at Inspiring Leadership to talk specifically about strategic mindset and what's happening for you right now in your world and your practice.
Thanks, Carlin. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all being safe. We're in the middle of the coronavirus, or not the middle, probably the first half of it. So I'm recording this from my home office. So the last few weeks have been interesting, to say the least, and I'm sure we've got many months of more challenging times in front of us. Certainly, one of the things about strategic mindset is that good leaders use it and demonstrate it all of the time. And in the last 2 weeks, I've been working with a range of clients, both current and past, who have contacted me to talk about various issues that they're dealing with. And in fact, this morning, I've had 2 phone calls with a past client and a current one who have got issues that basically go right to the heart of the value and risk equation. And it's the same whether you're operating a very small startup, such as the phone call I had just before I got on this video conference, or a large listed company, such as the client I was talking with earlier this week, and everything in between. So what's value and what's risk? Well, value is how you determine it. And basically, the purpose of business is to A, be sustainable, and B, make profit. And if you're a not-for-profit, you still have to make money. Not-for-profits are also not-for-losses. So you need to be able to maintain your viability, your sustainability as a business and an organisation to be able to meet your mission. And there are many organisations in the so-called not-for-profit space at the moment before the virus hit that were struggling with the changes in government funding as our tax base opportunity decreases with the baby boomers moving into retirement and the increase of need of services for that ageing population, all of which has now been extrapolated by the impact of the virus, where the highest risk groups are over 60, such as myself, only just, and then over 70 or 80, where even if they survive, the amount of services required are enormous. So, value and risk, and having a strategic mindset. If you go onto the web, there's 1 million articles on strategy, and basically, strategy is about creating the beacon on the hill and understanding how you're going to get to it. The question for leaders is how do we understand what those steps are, and how do we actually judge both the opportunity and the risk in that? And what Carlin has so nicely called the right triangle actually came out of a conversation with a client some years ago who was talking to me about not understanding how to make those judgments or not feeling safe in making those judgments. So literally the diagram I drew on a whiteboard with this client to try and help that client understand that as you go up the ladder and you get to the top, part of the joy of being the person who can actually lead the organisation is also the exposure to the cold winds of risk. But in everything you do, the opportunity and what you're trying to do is actually to understand what is value. And value comes from turning risk into value or decreasing risk from impacting on your value, if you like. And most of the great opportunities that have caused label organisations to be successful is they've seen a risk as an opportunity. And those of you who have studied SWOT will know that unfortunately many people apply a SWOT merely from their own view. What they don't look at is the SWOT elements from the view of their competitors. That's why is their strength as they see potentially a weakness for them as seen by their competitors.
And so I'll just, for just 1 second, I'll just clarify for those of you who don't know what SWOT is. The model is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a way to do an environmental scan of your organization in service of your strategy. So I just want to set that in case people didn't know the model.
Thanks, Carlin. My apologies if I veered into vernacular. So let's get to it. So what are the issues that are currently being dealt with? Well, the fact is many of them are issues that are dealt with by organisations on a daily basis in addressing their strategy, but the environment's changed. So when you learn how to do strategy, as many of you have, either academically or by experience, rarely do we ever think about a pandemic which changes the rules. is the reason that we try to apply strategy models is to set some rules that guide us. And yet this is the second pandemic in, what's this, 20 years. So it's not a once in a century event. And for many of you in leadership roles, this is the second in your career. And the chances are for you, if you're young enough, you might be lucky enough, in inverted commas, to have a third one. I hope not for your sake. So today, I've dealt with a client who's got a shipment of goods sitting in China who 30% down need to pay 70%. The dollar's tanked and they're trying to work out whether they should buy it now. But that's not a scenario that's unusual to any of you that have import-export businesses at all in the wholesale space. Yet for this client, very small startup, very, very cash limited, complete online sales, and most of their market is based in America, even though they're based in Australia. So when you put all those factors together, that's a difficult call. So how do we go about that? We looked at the value and the risk. There's an article reissued by McKinsey yesterday on strategy in uncertain times. It's written in 2000. It's a great article. You should look for it. And it talked about the 4 levels of strategy and uncertainty. And it talked about how you could develop, if you like, some rules or frameworks to enable you to understand. But one of the big clues in it was, when you've got lots of uncertainties, don't make multiple options. Choose 3 or 4 options that you think you can most likely, at least if you like, get your head around, and work out which of those you're going to go with, and be prepared to a constant review and change. So for this client, what we looked at is, what do we know? We know what their seasonal sales are. We know where their market is. We know why their clients buy their product. And what's the big shift? The clients buy this product, which is associated with extreme sports. So that right now, most of the events that will happen in the northern summer are on hold, or planning for them on hold. But in the conversation, what came out was that many of those athletes will now put more and more time into training because they could do that in self-isolation. So the fact is that the products they would use in the racing, or the competitions, they could use in training. And in fact, now that they won't be spending money on attending the events and the travel associated, even though some of them, their income may have gone down, the fact is they've probably got more discretionary money sitting there. And this product is a low price point. It's under $50 Australian, so $25 American. So the chances are that the opportunity for the sales, which are seasonal anyway, and pick up in July, is what the people buying it will still buy it, but they'll use it for the same use, but not in competition, but to maintain their training. So as a result of the phone call 45 minutes ago, is the client is now changing their marketing spiel, if you like, on their website. They decided to pay the 70%, which they're paying at a rate which is 8 cents per dollar, if you like, less or worse than when they placed the order. And ironically, their manufacturer in China, which is just coming out of the impact of the coronavirus, and they're a very small purchaser, has gone out of their way to look after them. Why? Because they need them. So in actual fact, from the risk becomes opportunity. It's about understanding how does that mean. And yes, we talked about capital invested, inventory held. We looked at what their stock turnovers normally were in a year, which products. We quickly discussed that and then looked at what the opportunity was now in this kind of climate. Now, for many of you running large companies, you might think that's not that big a call. For a company that lives on its cash flow, literally, and is only in the second year of its life, and they are both working other jobs to keep this company afloat, that's a huge call. That's at the very top of the pyramid.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at your clients right now and sort of the balance of risk and value, do you see more behaviors that are very risk averse, people trying to shut everything down? What behaviors are you seeing right now in your client base?
I think that, I don't wish to offend anybody, but I think for people who have always worked potentially in larger companies where they've got far greater infrastructure and they live inside a more secure environment, that when they get to the upper echelons, managing this risk value thing is sometimes a more challenging thing, because the step into senior management into the C-suite is a very big step. Now that doesn't say people who've worked in smaller companies or worked in companies that have grown actually learned to be better at it. They should have, but not everyone does. As we know, learning agility is one of those emerging things that we're trying to get our heads around ourselves, is how does that impact on the development of leaders. But certainly some people are more risk averse just by nature, and others have been trained to be more risk averse. So in our client base, we have some companies which are listed, but if you actually look at the culture of the company, they're highly entrepreneurial. And in fact, they struggle often with the corporate umbrella required of a listed company, because their divisions are actually run on the premise that they are an individual business. So classically, they actually have almost full control of their P&L, and they deal with the shareholder funds invested in the capital investment of capital in as close to being a business owner as possible. And often they're quite successful, but it's a real challenge through the requirements of governance and audit and you know, those reporting requirements at the same time. So what we have seen over time is quite frequently, as those businesses are growing, they're trying to maintain that corporate, that entrepreneurial culture, is they start to bring in people from larger companies to develop the corporate, if you like, larger company understanding and disciplines. And not only is there often a clash, and that's not necessarily bad, greater conflict works, but these people have been quite successful in the much larger structured organisations who fundamentally fail to fire in these smaller companies, or these companies with these entrepreneurial things. And that's because they're not of that type. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not talented and they're successful. They simply don't fit the mould. So some of the work we do is with helping clients make their decisions before placement. When they get to the final 2 or 3, we'll help them with their assessment, their interviewing of the final couple of people. As part of whoever gets the job, we work with them as part of their onboarding for the first 6 months to help them work and be successful. And it ensures that the person hiring them, the person coming in, have a much better platform to move forward from, because these hires are critical for the organisation. So each of these hires also sits at the peak of the value risk model, which is often not as well understood. And an example I'll give you is recently we worked with a client who had a number of, in their words, catastrophic hires, smaller company in the capital investment area, very niche, very successful. And we sat with the client and talked with them. They want us to help them in their selection of from the final 2 or 3 people. But it was very clear that there was a founder and a CEO, and they'd run this business for 10 years. And they had people underneath them, but this person coming in would be the next part of the growth at that level. And one of the comments I asked them, or one of the questions I asked them after about 45 minutes was, in your briefing of the search person, in your discussions with any of the people in the past that you've talked to, have you reflected the fact that the 2 of you have an extremely tight relationship? And in fact, talking to you, you basically don't even need to finish sentences because you understand each other so deeply. And they are poles apart in type, yin and yang. And they said, oh, no, why is that? I said, well, you know, for someone coming in here, they're going to be the third person in a relationship. So really, one of the key areas here is you need to understand how you can welcome someone into this very tight relationship you have. And this person needs to be resilient enough, not just from their technical and business skills, but to be able to actually step in and build a relationship with the 2 of you that is able to be successful.
So
now, why is that? Well, go on,
yeah,
sorry.
So does that mean that you're looking at value and risk and the balance of value and risk from the beginning of the hiring process all the way through as leadership
Yes.
grows? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also, if you look, the value and risk there is their risk, which had already come to being twice in previous hires, was that they hadn't actually addressed what the risk was. And the risk was they were changing the culture at the top of the tree in a very small, dynamic, highly entrepreneurial business. And they were actually looking to bring people in who came from much larger businesses to help them with that growth element. And that's all fine. But what have they missed was the dynamic form of the relationship these people had. And, you know, it was, you know, someone being invited into the couple and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So they actually changed in some ways the type of person they were looking at. They needed to be more resilient. They needed to really be able to build relationships effectively. They needed to be, you know, able to step in and have their voice heard, which I know people think everyone in the C-suite does, but that's not true.
Well,
Right?
and I have one last question for you, as far as what advice you would give to the folks watching here about their own ability to align people to strategy during times of stress. Because I think there's a huge amount of ambiguity right now. I think that there are a lot of questions to leaders about, well, what are we doing now? How has everything changed? What's the new strategy? Many people that we're working with don't have their new strategy yet, and they're still working to define it. So what are the right messages that those leaders can give to their people?
I think I was very fortunate early in my career to work for a CEO who was highly strategic and a great mentor, and remained a mentor for many years after we finished formally working together. One of the things he taught me was it's all very well to have strategy, but first make sure you know your business. Because if your business is not going to tick over every day, then the strategy is not going to be achieved. So that's the first one. Do you truly know your business? Do you know what makes it work? All right. The second thing is the days of setting 5 and 7 year strategies are long gone. I know people may disagree, but people these days talk about a strategic goal or goals. Some of our clients refer to the beacon on the hill. And it's about, if we're clear about the goals we want to get to, and then we look at how we best develop the pathways to get that. So if we know what we've got, and the 3 horizons model is one I use all the time. If we know where we want to be on the 3rd horizon, and you can actually shift the timeframes and that, despite what some people think, is that we need to understand that one of the manners of looking at that I was taught some years ago was, you know, 60% of what you're doing should every day in your monthly activity should fit under the 1st horizon, 30% should be activities for your 2nd horizon, and 10% should be activities for your 3rd horizon. Right? It's a simple thing. So it's about what am I doing today? How do I split that up to understand that what I'm doing today is building into my 2nd horizon and my 3rd horizon? And the other one I think is in all good strategy is courage. We've got to be able to look at what's happening around us, be flexible. Again, someone I heard speaking a while ago talked about how people have got these really long-term set strategies, which is wonderful. His question is, how often do they miss the opportunities that appear to the left and right of them as they walk down their set path? I think that's really true. So at the moment, as a client that we're working with, that in the midst of the current crisis, and it is a crisis, they've identified an opportunity that they didn't have before. They've actually looked at some of the set parameters in their business and one of their biggest fixed costs. And they've identified now is the time to go in and actually renegotiate. And what they've done is they're looking at engaging with a range of not competitors, but people who are competitors but operate that need the same supply chain. And they're looking at going back to some of the key suppliers and saying, we're all in this together, and together we can survive. However, this is the opportunity for you guys to actually become a partner, not just a fee collector. And it's an area where there's been multiple attempts in the last 30 years to get the supplier to actually be more than just the supplier and hold people to terms of contract. And so this person, instead of doing it alone, they've actually reached out to other parties who use the same supplier. Some of them they've never met before. And they're going to go and sit down and say, well, together we can all succeed. Now, that's being very strategic. And in a time of crisis, that's an epitome of value and risk. Identifying what's the common risk in this for a number of people. How can we turn this into a value that we can all share? And this is very much in the, you know, hard-fought commercial world, and yet it shows collaboration, it shows mindset, right? And it definitely shows broad scanning. Who else is involved in this? What else can I learn from this? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your time today. And we will put some more information below this video, including the article that you referred to, and look forward to hearing more from you in inspiring leadership. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good day.